They bricked in Jenna Flowers' car and called it Community Landscaping HOA. President Suzanne Puit, a control freak in heels, had been terrorizing the neighborhood for years with ridiculous fines and power plays, but when Jenna caught them secretly dismantling the evidence in the dead of night, she flipped the script. Now wait till you hear how the whole community rose up to crush Suzanne's reign and how justice finally bulldozed through those bricks. Jenna Flowers was enjoying a rare moment of peace that Sunday morning. The sun streamed gently through her kitchen window, the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. She had just settled into her favorite chair with a novel when her phone buzzed on the counter. She almost ignored it, but something about the frantic tone of her neighbor's voicemail caught her attention. "Oh hey Jenna, you're probably going to want to see this. It's about your car. Look, it's hard to explain over the phone. Just come outside now." Confused, Jenna grabbed her phone and rushed toward the front door. What the hell could be so urgent? She opened the door, blinking as the bright sunlight hit her eyes. Then she saw it. Her car, her perfectly parked sedan, was now encased in a fortress of red bricks. There were bricks where her tires used to be. A thick wall of stacked bricks surrounded the entire vehicle in a precise, almost artistic formation. It looked like some kind of absurd art installation, one that screamed both ridiculous and malicious in equal measure. Jenna's jaw dropped. She stumbled down the porch steps and onto her driveway, her brain struggling to process the scene before her. She walked around the car, eyes wide with disbelief. The brick wall wasn't just for show. It was solid, sturdy, built to last. There was no easy way to move her car now, not without a sledgehammer and a lot of swearing. "I see, what the actual is this?" she muttered, her voice rising in a mix of shock and anger. Her neighbor Roger emerged from his own yard, clearly waiting for her reaction. His expression was a mix of empathy and irritation. "It's your favorite people, our good old HOA," he said, sarcasm dripping from every word. "They're calling it community landscaping improvements." For a second, Jenna thought he might be joking. She gave a dry, disbelieving laugh, then looked back at the bricks. Nope, this nightmare was real. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides as a wave of cold anger surged through her chest. "You've got to be kidding me," she whispered, her voice shaking. "They actually did this for landscaping?" Roger shrugged, though his face was flushed with frustration. "Apparently you know sop for them. No warnings, no notice, just their usual we know best crap. They probably didn't like that you parked too close to the lawn. He sighed. "They've been looking for reasons to come after everyone this month." Jenna's mind raced. This wasn't just an overreach, it was outright insanity. She was caught between disbelief and a growing, simmering rage. The HOA had been a nuisance before, but this crossed every line imaginable. Tarzing, oh, they are going to regret this. The shock that had frozen her moments earlier was gone, replaced by a chilling sense of purpose. She wasn't going to let these control freaks brick in her life without a fight. The next morning, Jenna stormed into the HOA office, the door slamming against the wall behind her. Every step she took echoed with barely restrained fury. Her jaw was clenched so tight it hurt, and her fingers twitched, itching to grab something, anything that might relieve the tension bubbling inside her. The woman she had come to confront sat at a large oak desk in the center of the room, perfectly composed. Suzanne Puit, the president of the HOA, wore a cream-colored blazer that matched her carefully styled blonde bob. She looked up with a slow, practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Everything about her posture, her cold gaze, the slight tilt of her chin radiated smug superiority, as if she were a queen granting audience to a troublesome subject. "Ah, Jenna, what a pleasant surprise," Suzanne greeted, her voice sweet but laced with condescension. "Lovely morning, isn't it?" Jenna's nostrils flared. She could practically taste the venom hidden beneath those words. "Lovely." She was ready to throw the nearest chair out the window. "Cut the crap, Suzanne," Jenna hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "What the hell did you do to my car?" Suzanne raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. She leaned back in her high-backed chair, her throne, and crossed her legs elegantly with an exaggerated sigh. She folded her hands on the desk and spoke in a patronizing tone that made Jenna's skin crawl. "Oh, you must mean the landscaping Project Suzanne said lightly. Your vehicle was parked on an area designated for community improvements. The rules clearly prohibit parking on grassy areas. We simply enforcing protocol. Jenna barked, her voice rising. You built a goddamn brick wall around my car. You think that's protocol? You think you have the right to do that? Suzanne's expression didn't change, but there was a flash satisfaction in her eyes. She had been waiting for this, thriving on confrontation like a spider weaving a trap. She tilted her head slightly and gave a delicate shrug. Not the association's rules are non-negotiable, I'm afraid, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. If you feel our actions were unjust, you're welcome to file a formal complaint. The next review session is in 3 months. Jenna clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. 3 months. They wanted her to jump through hoops, to drown in red tape while her car sat imprisoned on her own property. Suzanne was playing a power game, one that she expected Jenna to lose. The smug grin that tugged at the corners of Suzanne's lips confirmed it. Jenna gritted her teeth, forcing herself to stay calm. Losing control would only feed Suzanne's ego. This isn't over, Jenna said coldly, each word laced with warning. Suzanne chuckled softly, leaning forward as if to deliver a final condescending blow. I didn't think it would be, dear, she said with a smirk. Good luck. Jenna turned on her heel and marched out, her mind already racing with plans. They wanted her to feel powerless, trapped, but they had underestimated just how far she was willing to go to fight back. Jenna wasn't the only one who'd had enough. Words spread quickly after her confrontation with Suzanne. Neighbors she barely knew, people who had lived quietly under the thumb of the HOA, started coming with their own horror stories. They fined me $300 for having a bird feeder, said it disrupted the natural aesthetic. My kids' playhouse wasn't within the approved color palette. We had to repaint it 3 times. I got a notice for leaving my trash bins out an hour too long. An hour. It became clear Suzanne Puit had turned the HOA into her personal dictatorship. The board, entirely composed of a handpicked cronies, enforced every petty rule with military precision. Fines and penalties flowed like water, funding endless so-called improvement projects. Meanwhile, residents were treated like trespassers on their own properties. Jenna knew this wasn't just about her car anymore. It was about exposing the corruption that had been festering in the community for years. She and a group of determined neighbors began gathering evidence: emails, HOA violation notices, even secretly recorded conversations. It wasn't long before they uncovered a pattern of blatant abuse. Suzanne had been using HOA funds for questionable expenses, high-end contractors, landscaping that never seemed to materialize, and luxury office renovations. But the real turning point came one night just past midnight. Jenna had installed a security camera facing her driveway after the brick wall incident when her phone buzzed with an alert she didn't expect. Much, probably just a stray cat. But when she checked the live feed, her eyes widened. There, under the cover of darkness, 2 men in uniforms from a local contracting company were quietly dismantling the brick wall around her car. They moved fast, working with military efficiency, as though they were on a secret mission. It was clear what was happening. Suzanne didn't want the growing controversy catching the attention of the press. She was trying to erase the evidence. Jenna didn't hesitate. She hit record and captured the entire scene, every last brick being carefully removed. The next morning, she emailed the footage to a local news station along with a detailed summary of her situation. Within hours, the story was on the air. The segment began with a dramatic headline: HOA nightmare, residents fight back against outrageous rules. And just like that, the internet caught fire. Twitter exploded with outrage and dark humor posts with the hashtag Free Jenna's car flooded the platform. Memes popped up like wildfire. One image showed her car surrounded by bricks with the caption, "When landscaping meets prison design." Another featured a photo of Suzanne with a devilish grin and the text, "Dictator of suburbia." The HOA chronicles. Even late-night comedians picked up the story. One host joked, HOAs are now bringing new meaning to brick and mortar tyranny. But what hit Suzanne the hardest was the local community. Neighbors began staging protests outside the HOA office, holding signs that read, Landscaping or lockdown, and brick by brick we. Rise journalists dug deeper into Susan's shady operations, uncovering even more corruption. The walls of Suzanne's power, much like the one around Jenna's car, were beginning to crumble, and Jenna, she was just getting started under intense public pressure and relentless media scrutiny. Suzanne Puit finally caved. The once untouchable queen of the HOA now stood nervously behind a podium in front of a cluster of cameras and microphones. Her signature sure-perfect posture was gone, her shoulders tense under a tailored blazer that suddenly seemed too tight. The press conference was broadcast live across local news stations. Jenna and a crowd of neighbors gathered outside to watch on their phones and tablets. Suzanne took a deep breath, then forced a smile so stiff it could have cracked porcelain. She began to speak in a voice that tried and failed to sound sincere. We recognize that there may have been a misunderstanding regarding the recent landscaping initiative. She stammered, her eyes darting nervously from camera to camera. In our effort to maintain the aesthetics and order of our community, certain decisions were perhaps not communicated as clearly as they should have been. For that we apologize. The crowd erupted into laughter and scoffing. Misunderstanding, you bricked in her damn car, someone shouted. Suzanne's fake smile faltered for a second, but she quickly composed herself and continued. We are committed to reviewing our policies and ensuring that all future improvements are handled with transparency and respect for our residents, she added, clearly reading from a prepared script. Jenna crossed her arms and shook her head in disbelief. Respect. The woman wouldn't know the meaning of the word if it hit her like a wrecking ball, but in truth Suzanne's apology was too little too late. The damage to her reputation and her hold on the HOA was irreversible. The very next week, at a highly anticipated HOA meeting, residents turned out in record numbers to vote on key reforms. The atmosphere was electric, with both defiance and hope. Jenna stood near the front watching with satisfaction as Suzanne's allies on the board were picked off one by one through a series of votes. Finally, the motion to remove Suzanne from her position as president passed with an overwhelming majority. Applause and cheers erupted through the meeting hall. The reign of tyranny was over. In the following days, sweeping changes were implemented. The HOA bylaws were rewritten to limit the board's power and protect residents from arbitrary fines and punishments. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt like a real community again. A few days later, Jenna stood in her driveway, removing the last of the stray bricks that had been left behind. The once imposing wall was now reduced to rubble, and her car sat free in its rightful place. She paused to wipe her hands, letting out a long breath. The tension she'd been carrying for weeks finally melted away. Roger strolled over from across the street, a wide grin on his face. I've got to hand it to you, Jenna. I never thought I'd live to see Suzanne Puit cornered like that, but you did it. He chuckled. You really took her down. Jenna leaned on her car and smirked. Honestly, I wasn't trying to take her down, she said with a shrug. I just wanted to park my damn car. Roger laughed, shaking his head. Well, you did a hell of a lot more than that. Jenna smiled, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The fight was over and they had won. For once, justice hadn't just been served, it had been bricked in, and demolished peace had finally returned to the neighborhood.